My name is Chelsea Cohen, and I am the co-founder of SoStock.com. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about some inventory planning. I know 2020 was a crazy, crazy year, and everyone realized how important inventory planning is to actually having a successful, thriving, profitable business. So let's go ahead and get started. Share my screen here. All right, fantastic. So hopefully everybody can see my screen. Type in the chat, let me know you can see my screen. Should see a slide deck. All right. Fantastic. So a little bit about me. All right, I got a couple comments here. Okay, great. You can see it. A little bit about me. My name is Chelsea Cohen. I'm the co-founder of SoStock.com. I am also an Amazon seller. I'm a speaker and copywriting expert. I got my start on the Amazon stage talking about copywriting. So I've worked with a lot of 6, 7, and 8-figure sellers, helping them to improve their copy, and spoken on podcasts, AMPM podcast, Seller Stories with Jungle Scout, spoken on the amazing.com stage and several other stages. And about 2018, I started realizing how important inventory was and how detrimental it was becoming to my business and my bottom line, little mistakes here and there. And so I started to dive into inventory management, right? So mistakes like running out of stock, ordering too much, paying a lot of expensive fees. Let me know if any of this is familiar. You know, I had a time where we lost about 30K worth of sales early on in our business because our inventory was stranded, paying a lot for storage fees, loan interest when you borrow money for inventory that then doesn't move. And so I knew I had to do something to handle this challenge. So I dived into inventory management and started investigating exactly how to structure my inventory. But I found that it was taking the majority of my time. So I wasn't able to do the marketing. There was a lot in my business that I was then sacrificing because of the amount of time I was taking to do the inventory correctly. And so I looked for a tool, and all the tools that we were trying didn't seem to work the way that we needed them to work. So I asked my mastermind friends, I would ask them, okay, tell me what tool you're using. And again, the answer would come back that there was nothing out there and they were going back to spreadsheets. So that's when I dived into the idea of creating a software. So all that to tell you that essentially I have spent many hours and hours and hours, actually the past 2.5 years, really eating, sleeping, and breathing inventory management, talking to hundreds of sellers, trying out various different softwares, and figuring out what is it that works about inventory, what's a good inventory system, what systems should you have in place to be able to have a successful inventory management system. And why is it and that so many sellers, even big time 7 and 8-figure sellers, seem to be consistently running out of stock, right? We talk about the concept of scaling, but how much of us are talking about the subject of inventory management? Inventory management is extremely closely knit into cash flow, and cash flow is what we all seem to be having problems with when we're trying to scale. So when you really are trying to scale your business, you're really having a conversation around the subject of inventory management and cash flow. So I want to talk about the mistakes, the most common mistakes, as well as the best practices, and something that you can apply to whether you're using SoStocked or you're using a spreadsheet. A lot of these main principles can be applied. I wouldn't say no matter what system you're using, because some software systems may not have these types of best practices built into them. But certainly if you're using some sort of spreadsheet system, a lot of these things can be applied. So if you're not at the point of needing to use a software, then you could do some of these things inside of a spreadsheet. I just like to say that. And then if you are at that point of DIY, maybe you have a couple of SKUs, you can send me an email, and I can actually give you a little spreadsheet that we have. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and dive into the presentation. All right. So we're going to talk about first, real quick, common inventory mistakes. So there are generally 3 inventory mistakes. There's a couple of different reasons for them, and there are things that you can do and systems that you can put into place to avoid these mistakes. But there are basically 3 common inventory management mistakes. So the first one is under ordering, right? You don't order enough and you run out of inventory, you stock out, right? So that can be done simply because you're not analyzing your data correctly. So here's an example. Last Christmas, you sold 6,000 units. You stocked out for 1 week. You lost 1,200 units of sales. So your actual potential was 7,200 units. You should have sold 7,200 units, but you sold 6,000 units. So what you end up doing is you end up looking at how much inventory did I sell last Christmas? Let me place my order so that I can repeat what I did last Christmas. And then you end up placing the same order based on that bad data, forgetting that you stocked out and not adding the stock out units back into your calculation. You're essentially making the same mistake twice. So sometimes we under order because we don't have the granular data connected. This is especially important when you get into calculating sales based on, say, last year or last season, because it's usually easy to remember that we stocked out 30 days ago and much harder to remember that we stocked out, say, a year ago. So that's one example of your data being incomplete or being faulty and throwing off your calculations. Another example of a mistake that is commonly made is over ordering, right? You're ordering too much, and I'll show you how that can also be affected by bad data, right? So for example, last fall, you say have a back to school product, and last fall there was a special on, say, the Today Show talking about back to school, and they do a feature on the best products for back to school, right? Make sure this thing is in your kid's backpack when they go back to school. And that specific media feature generates 3,000 units of additional sales. So you go back and you look back at your data and you go to order for the next fall and you say, okay, we had 10,000 units of sales. Well, you don't have another media piece planned for this season. You then are essentially over ordering. You should have ordered 7,000 units and you have an excess of 3,000 units. Then you're paying extra storage fees. You have that capital tied up so you can't put it into other things, and you get into that cash flow crunch. Again, making it the same mistake twice. It's really not using your data very granularly and not analyzing that data. So that's another one of the mistakes that can commonly be made by looking at the data a little bit wrong. Then the last basic mistake is cutting it too close. So this is essentially just not taking the time to actually get the inventory in before you stock out, right? It's either that you think that your supplier's lead time is 60 days, but it's been turning into, say, 75 days or even 90 days, right? The lead times are longer, and that you're not factoring in the longer lead times. It can also be that it just takes so long to prepare these reports, and there are so many things to do because you're running the business by yourself or with your spouse, and there's just so many things to do that you just put it off until it's too late, and you realize you should have ordered last week, and you're then scrambling. And that also causes not just stockouts, but then can cause expensive air shipments, right? Consistently having to ship by air, which can double or even triple the cost for some people. So the cutting it too close then has its own series of repercussions that can cost you money. All of this is about staying in stock, making sure that you are fulfilling your inventory in the most cost-effective way because you're planning ahead. All right, and feel free to ask any questions as I go along, and we'll get to them as best we can. All right, so let's talk about the best practices. So inventory management best practices. So to to kind of go on the examples that we were talking about with the over-undering and order-undering, what we essentially want to start doing is actually something that we call adjusted velocity. So adjusted velocity is just a different way of thinking of your inventory. So instead of thinking of whole months of sales, total sales for say a month or say 60 days or 90 days, you're actually looking at the daily velocity to figure out exactly how much you sold on a daily basis for that period of time. And it's adjusted because it's removing those sales spikes and the stockouts, right? So adjusted velocity works by using averages, right? Not monthly totals. You can also use last year's sales, but you are using last year's sales and you're taking an average of a specific time period, right? And then you're removing sales spikes, you're removing stockouts, you might even remove deep discounts, and you could apply trends, right? So that would, inside of the SoStock system, that looks like this. And again, you can find ways to do some of these things inside of a spreadsheet. So if you're doing it inside of a spreadsheet, you would have to take a just keep track of the dates and the dates and the times in which you stocked out. But what that would do is you would look at locating all of those spikes. And when we look at spikes, we consider anything 150% of your average sales for the period as a sales spike. So that's important, is to define what does a sales spike mean to me. These are a little bit more difficult to locate because it's a little bit more difficult to be granular inside of Amazon. So a software tool can do that for you if it is programmed to do that, like SoStock is. Otherwise, you would have to do it. You'd have to just pay attention to your daily sales yourself, because the reports are not as granular as this. So it's locating your sales spikes, and you can decide to eliminate all of them. You can decide to only eliminate, say, a couple of them and keep the rest. But eliminating sales spikes, you want to eliminate the sales spikes if you don't think they are going to repeat. If they're going to be consistently repeating, then you can leave them. For example, if you do lightning deals every single week, leave those. Even though they're spiking your sales, leave those. It's just a matter of removing anything from your calculation that you think is not going to be repeating itself. All right, so that's sales spikes. Stockouts works similarly. What it's looking at is any time when your sales plummeted by 70%. So you're used to selling 100, then you sell 25 in one day, and that's obviously something wrong. You don't want it to repeat itself, and for it happened for some reason. Perhaps it was that you just stocked out and that was the day before you stocked out. Then you have a bunch of zeros. Then Amazon finds one unit and sells it. And then you come back in stock, but you have a low sales day the day you come back in stock. All of that we want to remove that. We want to remove the entire stock out pattern. So you remove the entire stock out pattern. The other thing that this does is it can catch suspensions, because we're looking at patterns. We're not just looking at did you have stock or not, right? For some of the slow moving products, we're not looking at patterns, because if you sell 1 unit a day, it's very hard to get 30% of 1 unit, but we're always doing that for the higher velocity. All right, so let's go ahead and jump on to the next. So that's adjusted velocity. It's just thinking a little bit differently about your numbers, right? Not thinking about total monthly sales, because that's where it can start to kill you, especially if you've had stockouts or sales spikes. All right, then buffer stock. If you only applied one thing to your systems, buffer stock would be that thing. It's also known as safety stock. It's like a false zero. It acts as a trigger to warn you to place an order before you stock out, right? So it's not, okay, I'm almost running out, I better send something. It's I'm almost eating into my buffer stock, I better send something, right? So for example, if your buffer stock is 250 units, then you will be told to order so that it arrives by the time you hit 250 units, not the time you hit 0, right? It's kind of like when your low fuel light comes on, you know that you're not going to stall out right in the middle of the road. You know you still have time to get to the gas station. So that's kind of what buffer stock is. Okay, so some guidelines on buffer stock. The longer the lead time or the transfer time, the higher the buffer stock. So what this means is essentially that the longer it takes for something to get to you and the more steps there are, the more chances of something going wrong. For example, some people are dealing with lack of cartons, right? Or lack of containers. So they can't ship because there are no containers available to ship their inventory in. That's one of the problems that we're experiencing, right? We're also, you could experience, for example, weather. You have a hurricane off the coast of China that stalls things for a week. You have manufacturing delays, people not being able to find the raw goods to produce the products. There's a lot of different things that can go wrong. And so the longer the lead time, the longer the buffer stock. So for example, a good rule of thumb for, say, private label business might be 30 days, right? 30 days of extra inventory available. For a business that sources locally, where you can get inventory into Amazon from production all the way to completion, maybe, if it takes a week, wholesale businesses, for example, if it only takes a week, then you can have a much, smaller buffer stock potentially, right? Some other guidelines on buffer stock: set your buffer stock in days rather than in units. And let me show you how that would look. So for example, you've got buffer stock, right? You can set it in days or you can set it in units. Say we set it in units and we are using 300 units as our buffer stock, our minimum stock. And we are selling 10 units a day. Well, that's 30 days of buffer stock, right? 300 units at 10 units a day would be 30 days of buffer stock. Let's say we get into our high season and now we're selling 100 units a day because it's Christmas time. Well, that 30 days of buffer stock just turned into 3 days of buffer stock. So we'd have to go in here and we'd have to change it if we remembered that. And what if we had a bunch of SKUs and that was happening with a bunch of SKUs? Well, switching to days in stock, you can simply set this to 30 days and it's going to calculate your buffer stock for that time period based on the velocity. So it's going to look into the future and see, okay, by the time this inventory arrives, we need, say it's 20 units a day. We need 600 units of buffer stock because that's 30 days of buffer stock. So it's going to fluctuate based on your sales. It's going to change based on your sales. So having a buffer stock in days is highly recommended. So however your systems are set up, tying your buffer stock to your velocity can be extremely effective, right? So and what that would do is it would set you up so that it's telling you to ship inventory in before you run out of stock. All right, so instead of getting to 0, it's getting you to send the inventory in before you hit your buffer. All right, some final guidelines on buffer stock. Consider setting a buffer stock for your FBA warehouse, as well as setting a buffer stock for your third-party warehouse. All right, it's not necessary all the time, but some people like that extra cushion, especially if they've had problems in the past. And then lastly, there's something to consider regarding setting buffer stock. There are essentially two different business models that use a lot of inventory management and inventory planning. Wholesale businesses, right, where they're buying inventory from a supplier and then they are selling their inventory with other sellers on that same listing. And then there's private label, and private label, you are the only one selling on your listing. So the way to handle buffer stock can be very different for wholesale and for private label. Wholesale could get away with, say, 10 days of buffer stock, because if they go out of stock, there's another seller who's going to maintain that ranking for them. So there's not a risk of stocking out as much when you're doing wholesale. So your buffer stock doesn't have to be not stocking out. There's not a risk of losing ranking when you run out of stock with wholesale. There's a big risk of losing ranking when you have private label and you run out of stock and you're the only seller on that listing. So that's one factor, is that you don't want to have to pay to re-rank. The other factor is that you don't, is that Amazon has an algorithm, right? The algorithm looks at your inventory, because Amazon is looking at how much inventory you have spread out across the country. Where is that inventory? Where is the buyer that's purchasing that product? So if the buyer is in, say, Kentucky, and they want to go purchase a product, you don't have anything near Kentucky to sell them, Amazon might start pushing your product down the ranking in Kentucky, in that area. And that's known as geo ranking, ranking by location. So you may look and see that your ranking is a certain position, but someone in another place may see you a little bit lower. And additionally, when you're bidding on ads and you're bidding on a specific keyword, if you don't have inventory in that space, Amazon might give that ad to your competitor because you don't have inventory to provide, right? So those are some of the aspects of the algorithm that Amazon has going on, and that have to do with maintaining a good amount of inventory dispersed throughout the country. Another aspect is we've had users who've seen their one-day Prime badges. Some products have one-day Prime badges. They'll lose their one-day Prime badge if they don't have enough inventory. So that's something to keep in mind when you're planning out your buffer stock. Don't keep it too lean that you don't have enough inventory and that your products are then negatively affected. All right, next we're going to get into MinMax restocking. This is very much tied to buffer stock. So if you're doing buffer stock, this is something that you might want to consider, especially for your FBA shipments. So MinMax restocking means that you're setting a range of highs to lows, right? So what that means is, and I'm going to stop sharing for a second. So what that means is that you have your buffer stock, and then you have your max stock. You have a maximum amount of inventory that you want to send in, and you have a minimum amount. So your buffer stock, let's say it's 30 days. And then let's say your max stock is 90 days. You're going to be told to ship into 90 days, sell through to your 30-day, and then stock back up to 90. So you're going to always stay within that range, right? And that's called MinMax restocking. And that concept came for us when I toured a warehouse, and this warehouse produces print-on-demand books, right? So they have a ton of paper, they have a ton of ink, and they always have to keep it in stock, because if someone places an order, they need to be ready to get that book out the door in the next couple of days. So they have everything on weighted systems, and they had a minimum weight and they had a maximum weight. And so they would let the ink go down to the minimum weight, then they'd fill it back up to the maximum weight, and then they let it go down to the minimum weight. And so that's what this concept is just, you know, consistently filling to the maximum, going down to the minimum, filling up to the maximum. So how this works is this. Let me grab your transfer schedule. Switching to as needed, we activate MinMax restocking. We set it for number of days. We go to 30 days as our minimum, 90 days as our maximum. And so the system is going to know, based on the velocity and based on looking forward and seeing how much the next 90 days worth of inventory will be, we'll stock it up to that 90 days, and then we'll sell it through and then stock it back up again. The only difference, the only thing that you need to keep in mind is that you may have a restock limit. So if you have a restock limit, that can pose a challenge, right? So here's where the challenge is posed. Is, say, for example, we wanted to have our max stock at 120, but we're only allowed 95 days of inventory. So that's obviously less. So your max stock for some of your products may be that restock limit. And you can get that restock limit. We're actually pulling this from Amazon. Amazon's giving us the restock limit from the API on a daily basis. That's something that you can access if you go to your reports, and it's fulfillment reports, inventory reports, and restock report, right? You want the restock report. It's going to give you your max ship quantity and your total amount that you can send. And so, for example, if we had our max ship quantity as lower than what our FBA max stock was set at, we're going to always go for what is lower. So in this case, we would go for 95 days. We would send in our limit. If we had 90 days as our max stock, we would send in 90 days, not 95 days as it has here, right? So that's just something to keep in mind, is that sometimes your max stock is going to be your restock limit until things change. Okay, so some benefits for MinMax restocking. So obviously you're able to optimize your inventory levels. You have your buffer stock, so you're going to reduce the amount of stockouts that you have. You're also going to reduce the high FBA storage fees by setting that minimum, knowing that you're sending in, say, 90 days worth of stock instead of sending in, maybe 200 days worth of stock on some products. And then your final benefit would be that you're actually systemizing things. I call it the McDonald's effect, right? McDonald's effect, you basically go in and you learn, okay, push this button, that button orders the Big Mac. That's kind of what you're doing here. There's a lot of sellers who do everything by gut, and they can never pass on the inventory to somebody else because they say, I always have to look at it and I have to decide what I'm going to do based on so many different things. Well, this allows for you to set those parameters so that an assistant or a VA can actually take over that task. They can always show it to you and you can approve everything, but it will help to cut down on some of that work because you're actually systemizing things. Unless you systemize things, you can never pass them on. You'll always have inventory management as one of your tasks. And I know some people really hate inventory management. So this is a little tip on how to start to get rid of some of those inventory management tasks and pass them on. All right, then there's the inventory timeline. So this is personally, to me, I think a game changer, especially for those people who hate numbers or who get tripped up with numbers or who have a hard time visualizing why the numbers are saying what they're saying. And we're going to show you in here what an inventory timeline actually looks like. So an inventory timeline is essentially just a running daily assessment of what is happening with your inventory. So this one looks a little bit crazy. It looks a little bit busy because we have, some marketing events in here, right? At its basis, what it's actually showing me is my inventory levels as they're going down, right? In this column, when I have orders arriving, right? And and what's happening with my warehouse inventory. When I have transfers leaving my warehouse and going into Amazon, when my orders are coming into my warehouse, and it just shows me every day what's happening. It can include things like a lightning deal maybe that I have planned, right? I scheduled out a lightning deal so that I know that I have to order extra inventory during that time. And if I don't put that in there, then I could run out of stock earlier than I think, right? So you should be scheduling out all of your sales. Say we're going to run a sale during Easter, maybe we have an Easter product and we have Easter sales. We can add all of this data in here and it just helps us to visualize what is actually happening. And if there were to be a stock out, for example, I think we might have, yes, if there were to be a stock out, we would actually be able to see it and see when is it going to happen and how could I potentially prevent that from happening, right? So it just really helps you to visualize these things. All right, so that's the inventory timeline. So the benefits of inventory timeline, you track your inventory changes over time. You visualize the patterns that are occurring in each SKU, right? You want to do it for every single product. You foresee stock outs. You know when to place orders and transfers, and then you have a daily running total of your inventory, and you can see when inventory is supposed to be arriving, right, based on your lead times. All right, then you have simultaneous forecasting. So that's sounds fancy, but it's a pretty easy concept. And what simultaneous forecasting is essentially is just that you need more than one forecast. If you have a warehouse that you're using, you actually need more than one forecast. You need a forecast for ordering from your supplier, and then you need a forecast for transferring from your warehouse. So you can see that we're actually doing 2 forecasts at the same time. We're doing an order forecast and a transfer forecast. And if you have an express lead time, so let's say, we have an air freight, we can also add an air freight or an express shipping time. And then that will give us an additional, let's see, we don't need any. That will give us an additional forecast. So that's 3 forecasts that are happening. There's the standard order forecast, the express order forecast, and then the transfer forecast. So that's something to keep in mind, is that if you're using a third-party warehouse, you need more than 1 forecast. You need to be thinking of both of those things at once. It's kind of like what is it? Walking and chewing bubble gum at the same time. All right, so simultaneous forecasting. Then we have forecast modeling. So forecast modeling is basically, it's just a concept. It's the concept that our entire system was built upon. And it's the idea that inventory is a science and it's an art, right? So you're taking past data, right, which is the science or the math side of things. You're taking past data to try to predict the future sales. But if you only take that past data, you can get into some trouble, especially because we are very marketing minded as Amazon sellers. We're going to be marketing. We're going to be doing some things. We're going to be trying new things. We're going to be trying to boost our sales. So if we don't put the marketing side and the marketing plans into our inventory, then we can't get a good idea of how much inventory we actually need. So forecast modeling means that you can add those marketing plans and you can see what's going to happen, right? What would happen if I, say my lead time changed? What would happen if I boosted sales by 10%? Would I stock out? Would I be able to support that type of a change? So you can actually go into the system and test it out and see if you have enough inventory for something, even as much as, making a change to your listing. If that boosts your conversion rate, is that going to make you stock out, right? So that's the concept of forecast modeling. All righty. That brings us to a concept that we like to call sync to scale, right? Scaling really does have a lot to do with inventory and cash flow, right? Currently, we're sitting in the inventory space or in the marketing space, and we're very marketing focused, like I mentioned, right? We all like to talk about marketing. What are your marketing hacks? What are you doing with PPC? What are you doing with listing optimization? And a lot of the conversation is around marketing. It's the sexy subject. The inventory is the unsexy subject. And so not a lot of people have pushed into that area or that part of their business quite yet. We're interested in making inventory and marketing work together. So inventory should be giving data to marketing about what's happening with the inventory, right? What is overstocked? What is having, what is potentially a product that you want to liquidate because it's got slow sales? What are we going to stock out on? All that data should go from marketing or from inventory to marketing, and marketing should be able to take that inventory data and make marketing plans based on it, and should also take their marketing plans and send them to the inventory team so that the inventory team can let them know if they're going to stock out on anything, right? Because you shouldn't be finding out when the stock out is occurring. A lot of times marketing will do things and inventory finds out about it when they realize that they're going to stock out. So it's a good idea to start syncing up these teams to get them to work together. And then that will lead into cash flow, because if you're keeping your inventory in stock, then that will improve your cash flow. So marketing, I like to say that a good marketing plan can turn bad really fast when it becomes so successful that it stocks you out, right? So I wanted to give you a couple of ideas on what it means to have marketing stockouts. So for example, a PPC ad campaign goes so well that it stocks you out. This is something very common. I've talked to a lot of PPC ad agencies and I've asked them, have you ever stocked out a client based on your ad campaigns? And almost invariably it is yes. So you pay a company to do ads for you, and they take your money and they spend it on Amazon ads, and then you stock out. So that's one thing to consider, is that you're going to be paying for the lost sales. You're going to be paying for air shipments, possibly paying to re-rank, but you also paid for those ads that led you into the stock out, and you paid the ad agency to stock you out. So that gets to be a very expensive mistake. So all that has to happen when you start working with an ad agency is to ask them what is expected, and how do you see if the inventory can support that, right? So you can jump into your forecasting, and you can simply plug in a number, right? You can add additional sales growth. So they say 20% immediately. Are you ready for us to increase your sales by 20%? And then you can apply it to whatever products you are going to start marketing with them. And then you can see, okay, good, that's fine. 0 days out of stock. So I can support 20%. So that is something that's very doable. What if they doubled, right? Not saying that that's going to happen, but yeah, with this product, that's fine. But maybe another product, it's not fine, right? This one is going to stock out already. So if we even added 10%, it's going to have a longer stock out. So you can see it increased the stock out, right? So that's one example. Another example would be sending out a coupon code email, right? Mother's Day is coming up. This is very common for holidays, right? You realize that there's a holiday and might as well do a sale. Did you plan for that sale when you placed your order? Probably not. So if you didn't plan for that sale, and then you went and you did it on a whim and you sent out a 20% off coupon, you did really, really well with that coupon. Then the next month you're stocking out. Well, that coupon, you just gave 20% off into a stock out. You could have had full price sales and maybe avoided a stock out. So it's planning these things. It's before you take these actions, these marketing actions, seeing if you'll be able to afford it, trying to predict it, what we called forecast modeling it out first and seeing if you're going to have a stock out or if you can support it. And then also helping to predict future orders based on those marketing plans. And then we mentioned listing optimization. If you double your conversion with some good copy or some great EBC content, will you be able to support doubling your conversions? If not, then maybe you hold off until your next order comes in and then apply those changes, right? Vetting your inventory before implementing marketing strategies will help you to prevent those stockouts, and that overall is going to increase your profit and your cash flow. All right, then there's inventory. So I like to say, in an inventory-based business, when you're out of inventory, you're out of business. So it's very important to have your inventory be accurate. A lot of people who use our software, they really want to use it for the forecasting, but then many people just want to know where their stuff is, right? So you have to be able to account for the available inventory that Amazon has, right? Your reserve minus customer orders, right? Amazon has that reserve amount, and that reserve number is anything that's being transferred into or out of a fulfillment center into another fulfillment center somewhere across the country. So you'll have, as your inventory is checking into one location or 3 locations, Amazon then starts shipping it all across the country. So it goes into the reserve category, and you need to know that you've got, hundreds or even thousands sometimes of units that Amazon has, like shipping all across the country to get them that dispersal, and that needs to be accounted for. How much inventory are you currently personally sending into Amazon, right? Your inbound Amazon inventory. Your warehouse inventory needs to be accounted for, anything you're sending into your warehouse, and then anything that's on order or in production. So you need to have ways of tracking this. So for example, the inventory timeline will show you all this. The warehouse, the FBA inventory. Let's see, I can grab this one. It's showing you reserve minus customer orders, anything that's coming into the warehouse, right? Any transfers. It's showing you all of these things But then another tip is to have some sort of a Kanban view, right? We have a Kanban view, kind of like a Trello board, right? Here's everything that's in production, everything that's that's en route, all of the estimated arrival times. So it shows us all of our inventory. And then lastly, we have inventory on hand where it shows us all of the numbers, available stock, reserve, inbound, and then all of the warehouse stock. So you have a total final count of all of your inventory. So that really helps to answer that question of where is my stuff, and making sure that you're adding all of that inventory together and accounting for it. Because if you don't have that accuracy, you might be placing orders that you don't need to place, or you might not be placing orders because you're double counting somewhere. So really having accuracy requires all of those steps to be in place, right? It seems like a lot, but if you have it all, listed out in several different columns, then it can become clear. All right, and then lastly is cash flow. So all I'll really say about cash flow is it has a direct relationship to inventory, and the game is to really utilize your cash in the best way to make the most money. And the faster your cash turns over, the more money you can make. Because basically, if I have $1,000 and I can take that $1,000 and I can double it in 1 month, then that's a lot better than if I can double it over 3 months. The compounding of me being able to move my money faster than somebody else means that I can really scale. So your ability to scale is directly proportionate to your intelligent utilization of capital. So that means if you're profiting more, you have more cash to spend. And if you're not ordering too much, so that you're tying up your cash in inventory that's moving slowly because you miscalculated and you over ordered, that also is slowing down the amount of times you can turn that inventory or turn that cash over within the same period of time, right? Within a year, for example. How often can you turn that cash over and invest it in something else to increase your cash and increase your profits? All right, lastly, I'm going to just briefly cover what has been the nightmare for everyone, that is Amazon. And hopefully, maybe by mid-year we'll be out of this. We call it the seller stockout cycle. Probably fairly familiar to many people. Amazon takes weeks to receive inbound shipments. Product stocks out while waiting for Amazon to check it in. 30 days sales is lowered due to stock out. Restock limit decreases due to reduced sales from stock out. And then it's basically this dwindling cycle, right? Your restock limit goes down, 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 down consistently because of this problem. So really the solution to this is to have a backup plan, right? Don't let Amazon be your only distribution channel. Amazon is a great distribution channel, but we're seeing that it can get into a little bit of a liability when you send all of your stock to Amazon. So if you send all of your stock to Amazon, it's what happened to me about the second year in business. I sent all of my inventory to Amazon right before Christmas. I just barely missed the deadline, and my inventory was literally sitting in some warehouse in just outside of Chicago till just after Christmas. They lost it, and then they found it after Christmas. They basically held that portion of my business hostage, right? So that's the thing that you have to keep in mind, that if you're sending all of your inventory to Amazon, you're basically leaving them holding all the cards. So having a plan and having a way to keep some of that inventory, and having a fulfillment center outside of Amazon where you can still take sales from that sales channel, FBM sales, fulfilled by merchant sales. You can still take those sales. You might be at a lesser profit, right? But you are at least still making money, right? You're still making money fulfilling. The other aspect that I wanted to introduce to you was that it actually helps you to avoid that stock out cycle a bit, because your restock levels will be maintained based on those FBM sales. So even if you're stocked out at Amazon, if you're still making and fulfilling sales, your restock limits will be maintained to that level. So you're not going to plummet in terms of your restock limits. So having some sort of a plan to fulfill through FBM, even if you're not currently going to be doing that, at least knowing where you're going to go, what warehouse you're going to use is going to be valuable for you, because, you know, without having a plan B, you can be left, you know, in a position where you're basically out of business for a period of time, at least for those products. And those products are usually our best sellers, if we're honest, right? I do have an episode, a webinar that I did about warehousing, tips for picking a good warehouse on our YouTube channel. I can send that out with this replay. Very valuable stuff, you know, understanding fees, how fees are charged, understanding how you can trust whether a warehouse is going to get your inventory sent out on time. Is it going to stick around? We had a lot of warehouses closing. So those are some of the, so you can check out that video. Those are some tips on that. Anyway, that basically wraps it up. But just to kind of recap, an Amazon inventory solution should be removing sales spikes and stockouts, factoring all of your marketing, including lightning deals, projecting seasonality, right? Like looking at past sales, which is something that our tool does as well. Tracking all orders and transfers, and then being able to allow you to get reorder alerts, and then managing your FBA inventory, your warehouse inventory, and all of your purchase orders as well. All right, let me know if you have any questions. I know it's kind of like drinking from a fire hose. I am, again, the co-founder of SoStocked.com. You can reach out to us at stock@sostocked.com for more information. And if you have any questions, let me know. SoStocked is currently available for lifetime pricing at $79 a month. And that lifetime pricing means it doesn't matter how big your business is, doesn't matter how big your business grows. What you will get is you'll get all the features. You will be able to keep that same pricing, and we will later be moving into some tiered pricing, and tiered pricing will probably start at least $97 and go upwards to, you know, $400 or so. And then at that point, everyone who has signed up for the lifetime pricing will still be locked into that lifetime pricing. All right, let me know if you have any questions. I don't see any questions at this point, but hopefully that's a good thing. Hopefully you guys are clear on this. And again, if you are going to apply one thing, start with buffer stock. That's been extremely effective, and it's really kind of the foundation of making sure you don't run out of stock. All right, I appreciate you guys. Thanks so much. I will send out the replay. And great, fantastic. Sippy says, thanks for your lessons. You're very welcome. So the replay will be sent out as soon as I'm able to upload it. It's great talking to you guys, and we'll catch you next time.